I loved Space Marine! There hasn't been another Warhammer 40K game that's given me such euphoric glee of smashing through hordes of foes and living out the fantasy of being the legendary genetically enhanced super soldiers of the 41st millennium, the Space Marines. Paired with amazing gameplay and a multiplayer an entire studio tried to emulate. You gotta give it to the game for inspiring a lot. But Space Marine isn't entirely alone in there. There are other amazing 40K games, such as Dawn of War, Dawn of War Winter Assault, Dawn of War Dark Crusade, Dawn of War 3. The special thing about Space Marine, however, was that no one really made a game close enough to match the gritty, war-torn world of 40K, and to bring an amazingly smooth and fine-tuned third-person shooter experience to boot. It's possibly one of the most polished and, well, crafted Warhammer 40K games I've ever played. I know this may be to the dismay of some fans who hold Dawn of War and others like that in such a high pedestal, but please, let me express my love for Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. Space Marine is a third-person shooter developed by Relic Entertainment and published by the now shut-down THQ. THQ Nordic doesn't count. No backseats! Where you play as Captain Titus of the Ultramarines, genetically engineered super soldiers with shoulder pads the size of 2 continents equipped with weapons capable of making any modern tank blush. Weirdly, Captain Titus also leads the second company of the Ultramarines, and not Cato Sicarius. For people not into 40K lore, and to explain why this is weird for 40K games who know that lore, in canon, Cato Sicarius is actually the captain of the second company in the Ultramarines. But since they couldn't hop-skip him to be tortured to death by the Inquisition, Captain Titus gets that honor. During your adventure, you'll be slaughtering hulking green menaces called orcs, a brutal and savage race that has been ravaging the galaxy for the sole purpose of finding a good fight. Later on, you'll be encountering the forces of chaos, corrupted traitors whose only desire is to kill you and everyone else on this planet in the name of their dark gods. Throughout this campaign, you try your deadly darnest to save the Adeptus Mechanicus War Titans and the big planet factory thing.
It's called the Forge World, you fucking castrol!
One of the 2 Space Marines that will join you on your liberation mission is Sergeant Zidonius, the bestest bro Marine who has ever broed on this side of Brosidon's Broshin. A veteran, a scholar, and a gentle Marine through and through. And the best battle brother you've ever had until... And then you're left with this absolute dumpster fire disaster of a Space Marine, Leandros.
Astartes does not support this action.
This Page monster bastard who trails his nose up and down the spine of every codex he grinds down until the fine dust to snort off the back of every new frickin' codex edition that Imperial orphans made with the very tear-filled eyes witnessing this blazing son of douchedom condemn Titus of nearly every move he makes with no logic to back it up. What is wrong with you? This waste of matter questions Titus on nearly everything he does, and contributes nothing to the team, but being a warm target to be shot at. Now, some may not find this glue chewer a problem, but I'm pretty sure this guy is probably why Space Marine never got a sequel.
You lie!
On a more positive note, the turning and aiming of your weapon is tight and spot on. The movement gave you the feeling of weight as a Space Marine, as it should, but kept the mobility and freedom that one should expect of a super soldier. The closest we ever got to this type of a game in this time period, excluding the future, was Fire Warrior. But I'll let Mandalore's video, which plug, let him elaborate on it. And when I get to editing my version after my first playthrough of it on stream, which you can find all this stuff in the description, other games in the 40K universe have come out after Space Marine that did capture the grim, dark future. Games like Space Hulk Deathwing have pulled this off amazingly, but that game sadly didn't quite grab me as much as 40K Space Marine did. Hell, I love Space Marine so much that I learned to speedrun the game. You have to love games to speedrun them. I grinded the route for 3 days straight and got the world record. I blazed through this game so much that I beat it in under 2 hours, and there are people who have found more tricks getting it to 1 hour 30. That's amazing. My time was not the most impressive speedrun, but considering the fact that barely anyone runs this game and tricks are still being discovered, there is only a few of us speedrunning it. And I encourage you highly to give it a try. Give the run a try for yourself. I've listed the info down below if you ever want to try yourself. But of course, after all that, it still begs the question that I still haven't answered yet. Why do I love Space Marine so darn much? For one, it controls really well, like extremely well. Looking around with any of the weapons is smooth and unrestrictive, even while aiming down the game's so-called sights. Other games who tried to mimic this didn't understand that when you turn your gun, it needs to stick with you as much as possible to match the player's reaction time. If I can't whip around quickly and start shooting due to me waiting for my character to turn, something has gone horribly wrong. I agree that slow turning speed should be used as a balancing tool with a heavy and powerful weapon comes into play, but for everything else, it's frustrating and doesn't feel good, like in a certain game. And Space Marine is 99% spot on, and it gives the exact wonderful and amazing satisfying feel that I purely enjoy. Along with that, movement is also done well. Walking around and strafing has a sense of momentum and stops and starts, but not too much to restrict you when the fighting gets going. You're able to walk, roll, and run nearly instantly, with the addition to some momentum to give you the feel of weight as a Space Marine, but to also keep you in control so you don't spaz out everywhere like in other games without this momentum. Running is a bit of an exception, as it's balanced so you can't sprint forward and instantly take a 90-degree turn, making it harder on players in multiplayer and not making the game too easy in single player, or else you could just rapidly dodge nearly anything. You're restricted going forward, but you can still gradually turn, forcing you to stop, side roll that direction to gain some quick distance, turn your mouse that direction you wanted to go, and thanks to how responsive the one-to-one aiming of your character is, you can then sprint to your new direction in just a short moment with your guns ready. Learning those nuances of movement, like when to dodge roll, sprint, strafe dodge, and move your character around can be an acquired skill that feels rewarding to accomplish. This becomes very prevalent in multiplayer as well when you're able to outmaneuver your opponent. The same thing goes for the weapons. Rarely did fans get to actually wield the mighty tools of the Imperium of Man, like bolters, las cannons, 2 bolters slapped together in the shed with flex tape, plasma guns, your trusty beat sticks, and so on. It is extremely satisfying to charge into the melee and circular fights entire hordes of orcs. Although the melee system of Space Marine isn't as nuanced and complicated as something like For Honor, it gives enough depth to the way you use your melee weapons. For example, the Thunder Hammer can be combined with various button presses to normally spin around and hit your enemies in a wide circle type AoE to deal with hordes, or to quickly get hits on a larger target. Alternatively, you can combine it with stomp/kick keys to use it as a quick stun to grab your enemies and use the execution to regenerate your health. Or you can combine it to do an overhead smash to do a large AoE around you, and also dish out a lot of damage on one target. Oh, and to quickly deviate, I am serious about regaining health by executing targets. If you stun an enemy by bashing it enough, or stunning it with a combo or a shoulder charge, you can execute them and gain some health back. As much as I never use this much now, when I first played on the hardest difficulty, I found how much of an interesting idea it is to force you to work for your health gain, since there are no health pickups or health stations in this game at all. And it keeps you in the fight and gives you an ability to pull off a cool execution and give you a bit of gore-spangled eye sex while rewarding you with health. One of my
opinions about
this game, though, is this system. It's not because it exists. In fact, it's a good solution to keep the player engaged in the battle instead of ducking behind cover to wait until your health regens and bringing the action to a screeching halt. My problem with it is how darn annoying it is to be taking damage while performing the execution. You aren't invisible while doing this, so if you're swarmed by orcs, and you will be, they'll all be taking pot shots at you while you're stuck in the animation, possibly leaving you with even less health than when you started. Another complaint that isn't 100% mine, but others I've heard that there is no complexity in the melee combat, in which I'd agree if they press more than the melee key. You get options and choices with your melee weapons, as the enemies react to each weapon in different ways. The chainsword is quick, suited to dealing with smaller targets, and has a final combo strike to AoE carve forward. The power sword, which is multiplayer only, acts similar to the chainsword but deals heavy amount of damage to players depending on which dial connection you're sharing. The power axe does decent damage to orcs and space marines alike, and has plenty of AoE slices to deal with hordes. And the Thunderhammer says, go fuck yourself, I win. If you can chain swings with the kick/stun key, you're able to change the way you deal with your targets. It's mostly a way to stomp and AoE targets around you to stun them, allowing you to get free and safe hits in, or to execute them for health. But each weapon has different results, like the Thunderhammer that does the overhead swing with a strong AoE, or a strong single target hit if you hit somebody with it. So there are nuances to it, but not as much I understand, but it is there. The previously mentioned guns also have a satisfying pop to them. As much as I could make 50 different videos going in depth about each gun, allow me to skim through most of the weapons to save some time. The weapons in this game take up the function most FPS games have. The general all-purpose gun, like an assault rifle, is the bolter. I know the bolter isn't actually an assault rifle. Please save it for Lord Nerds. I know it fires big mass reactive shells that explode upon entering the target. Please, I'm just using terms more reflective to the style of gameplay. They provide juxtaposition to other games. Shut up, thank you. The battle rifle is the stalker bolter. The sniper rifle, the las cannon. The SMG, the storm bolter. The shotgun, the melter gun, for some reason. And the standard basic pistol representation is the bolt pistol. There are changes and upgrades to the weapons along the single player campaign, but you don't get to customize them, which is a bit disappointing. Unlike in multiplayer where you're able to change perks and everything around, upgrades in single player are found throughout the game to give you additional power to deal with the heavier threats in later levels, which is common game designer stuff. The more you are, the more power, etc. There are chances to use the heavier weapons though, like the plasma cannon and heavy bolter in the single player campaign, but they're rare. But when they do happen, like when you find the autocannon locations, you feel like an absolute boss because a level played normally would be hell, but easy with boner-inducing when you have a literal cannon to rapid fire into your opponent's mouth. Don't take that literally. In multiplayer, you can take 2 of these as dedicated weapons. Overall, the ranged weapons themselves are satisfying. They represent and fill their roles well within a game when you are gunning down hordes of easy targets, while focus firing at big boy elites now and again. The choice to also put these weapons in common shooter game roles also helps players who are used to those types of gameplay. Playing one game that has a rocket launcher and then switching over to another game with a rocket launcher same in function but different in every other way, like looks and stuff, still keeps common players grounded with the concept. And new players can find it easier to transition out of Space Marine to other games or vice versa. While the ease of access is a great positive for new players, it can also be a bit of a letdown for those more experienced with the universe. When you have weapons that are supposed to launch diamine-tipped bombshells that turn bodies to gore, or weapons that connect bones and squash innards with the power of gravity, or grenades that rip holes in reality, causing singularities that sends all unfortunate bystanders in a supreme death hell, it's kind of disappointing to see them function like standard FPS guns, instead of what was previously described. But going by the game design I like to think I know, it's better in cases like these to stick with what people know or can easily learn. to eventually master. It all depends on the amount of depth the weapon provides and the situational choices you have with your weapons. Which, yeah, this game doesn't exactly have the depth of the Mariana Trench, but it's still deep enough to drown myself in. The depth comes from learning how and when to use and mix up your arsenal. Do you grind out mobs with a bolter and then switch to a melt-a-gun to do big boy damage to a larger target? Or do you use the melt-a-gun to kill the mobs and use the accuracy of the bolter to headshot the big enemy and conserve your limited melt-a-gun ammo? Or do you perhaps just use the melt-a-gun on everything and throw a lot of ammo away for the sake of speed? Overall, you have choices to deal with your enemies in an extravagant number of ways. Due to the restriction of carrying 3 different weapons, however, your 4th being your pistol you always have, you have to plan your loadout accordingly. For when I speedrun and play through the game, I keep my bolter and say, screw the plasma gun upgrade you get in the game, as it's too slow and cumbersome for the speed I need to maintain. Also carry the las cannon, which is great for headshotting knobs and Chaos Space Marines. I then carry the melt-a-gun to clear out waves of enemies quickly or point-blank football check anyone in my way. Finally, I keep the plasma pistol provided in the game due to its armor-piercing capabilities and because the game forces me to take it to continue. With this setup, the emphasis is on speed and accuracy, and it's the way I love to play. But you can keep the plasma gun, or choose to use the Vengeance launcher, which I forgot to mention is the sticky bomb grenade launcher of this game. A weapon that gives the players a chance to learn and master this weapon by timing when a grenade explodes, triggering the explosive in the middle of a mob, or sticking a whole lot of them on a target that's passing through a mob to destroy them all in a fireworks show of body parts. All of the ranged weapons aren't as versatile as this, but I wanted to bring it up just to show how darn good this weapon represents the amount of thought that went into each weapon's feel. God, it's good. Along with that, the areas which you march through has bits of level design I can appreciate. Whenever you receive a new weapon, you are presented in a situation to show you what that weapon is intended for. The Stalker Bolter puts you in a scenario with orcs up high that teach you about different planes of fire and to get adjusted to the weapon's effective range, similar to when you receive the las cannon. It shows you its power by presenting you with a tougher ranged enemy, showing you additional threats along the game. Due to that enemy's position, you can't go and melee it. And if you try your other ranged weapons, it'll probably just take too long. You can do it, but it'll be long. So trusting that the player wants to try out their new toy, it gives the player the right teaching environment to try out that new weapon. It's common game design, but done well here, and the scenarios you get to charge through are fun when you stop and smell the black powder. Scenes of all-out warfare, the Imperial Guard buckling under the weight of sheer force against them, only for you to come along and help them turn the tide of battle. Or you teaming up with Space Marines of other chapters to lay waste to your numerous enemies are so goddamn cool it makes me fall in love with the game all over again. God, it's good. Which brings me to the story and atmosphere of the game. Atmosphere-wise, it's good. It's good. Charging orcs through the trenches, being swarmed by chaotic forces, and seeing the war-torn 41st millennium is an absolute joy. What also brings it together are the servo skulls scattered throughout the levels off the beaten path. Listening to these will give you some additional perspective of setting, and I encourage you to find them all yourself if you can. As for the story itself, it's nothing special. It's a generic action story with a twist at the end. But one thing I have to give kudos for is the subtle building to the twist. And you can tell they still care to put effort into this, because some designer thought that someone would care. And I'm one of them. To explain, during your playthrough of the game will be subtly telling you that the forces of chaos have invaded, that Nimroth, who's the big bad guy of the game, has been tricking you the entire time. And it's really fun to find these signs throughout the game. And it all starts with the Inquisitor, because, obviously, the one with the miserable Skrillex hair. When you first find him, he is screaming into a console, demanding access, and the computer keeps rejecting him, mostly detecting that something is fairly off. Once the Space Marines approach him, the Inquisitor doesn't seem relieved, grateful, or show any sign of joy knowing that, yay, reinforcements have arrived, finally! And as much as Inquisitors may have been believed to be stoic and have no emotion, In various books, they are shown to just be people. They aren't completely devoid of emotions. So this reaction is really suspect. And before you meet the Inquisitor in person, you find a servo skull looking for the right person to deliver a dire message recorded by him.
What is the Inquisition doing here?
We're about to find out.
This is Inquisitor Drogan. I need urgent assistance at Manufactorum Ajakis. They're after the experimental device. The device is safe for the time being. I've drawn them off, but now I'm trapped. If I die, you must keep the device out of enemy hands, or he'll be unstoppable. I needed more time. Was nearly ready.
You hear in the background the enemy bursting in, and his tone and delivery is of dread and acceptance. He knows what's coming for him, and there's nothing he can do. So when you see him here, his reaction isn't what you'd expect. And when he talks to you, you can hear him analyzing the situation. He is wondering how to deal with the Space Marines in front of him and still get the power source he is trying to get access to. And you can see when he realizes that he can convince the Marines to escort him to the power source, keeping him safe against the orcs and to keep up the disguise of the Inquisitor, all the while getting the power source he needs for his ritual. A perfectly orchestrated plan in the name of the Dark God, surely. Another sign is when you remember that Leandros is an absolute cunt, to eventually rendezvous with the Inquisitor again, who is all by himself, just like in the console room. But this time, he's surrounded by Imperial Guard bodies with no signs of a fight against orcs. So if I were to just stroll up and see an Inquisitor surrounded by a bunch of dead guardsmen with no sign of a single enemy body, I'd be a bit suspicious before being executed for downing an Inquisitor. I know that this isn't really mind-blowing to most, but I'm proud of seeing something I found neat. So just let me be happy, Leandros!
Astartes does not support this action.
The rest of the story isn't amazing, however. It's your classic action plot of going through hordes of enemies to save the day. I do have to bring attention, though, to Lieutenant Mira. As much as I can preach on progressive thinking and all that, of a female being in a commanding role in the universe, I find Lieutenant Mira a breath of fresh air, honestly, compared to the generic stoic commander I find in a lot of other games. So, good job. Just good job, whoever made her. She's my favorite. Although, as much as I have been gushing over this game, I do not want to leave you with the impression that I find no faults over this game. I've already made some criticisms, but don't worry. 95% of my hatred is for your old boy Leandros, the bastard fuck. But some of my frustration with the game is some of the enemy designs. Not on how they look and sound awesome. It's how gosh dang difficult it is to get through these guys. Look, I get it lore-wise, if I'm laying into a Chaos Space Marine, his armor's gonna help him out. But an entire bolter magazine or multiple? Come on! Do I have ultramarine plot armor or does he do? It should be more like this.
For the Emperor!
Not this. Not to mention the bloodletters are just niddly little frustrations, especially when they just randomly backstab you when you're clearly far away from one, or even when you're just straight up staring one down. This also goes for the lack of melee duels you can have with some of the bigger knobs. If you toe-to-toe a knob with a melee weapon, it's either a death sentence or a struggle bus of attrition. I'm a freaking Space Marine! I want to feel like I can toe-to-toe these things. But sadly, it's far more efficient and safer to kite most of them around the room. Lastly, though, I need to mention the multiplayer. The fabled and valued multiplayer that an entire company tried to emulate everything about it, while missing a lot of the core functions that made the multiplayer beloved by so many and also dreaded. I can add multiplayer as one of my biggest pluses and negatives to Space Marine. The awesome and fine-tuned controls of the single player brought together against friends and foes online is an awesome experience, but at times it is some of the most frustrating experiences you will ever have. As much as I could go on for hours on the different balances of each weapon, and if Assault Marines are OP or super weak, the biggest problem cropped up when THQ sadly went down. With them, all of my unlocked perks also sank into the abyss of corporate death. Not to mention that the multiplayer is hosted by one player in the game, not by a server, so your experience with that can either be alright or enraging. Not to mention the Horde mode, which is possibly the most played mode, is still really fun, since I was just talking about player versus player stuff. The PvE co-op stuff is something of legend to a lot of 40k fans, and is something still played a lot today. A lot of people avoid the PvP stuff because it's so laggy and swampy, but I still encourage you to play the game and do the PvE stuff with your friends. It can be really challenging. Oh, one thing to mention, this is one of those rare 40k games where you actually get to take direct control of a dreadnought and murder all your friends.
Wait, how many kills does he have?
71.
He has 71 kills?
Well, he's got 72 now.
As long as you got the DLC. So it gets a plus for me, and as much as I could go more in depth with the multiplayer, I'm sure you don't want to hear a 3-hour bitch fest called Chapter 1. So, all in all, that's my love letter to Space Marine. This giant, horribly structured mess of a video is to see if I can bring myself to make something like this for my channel. So I figured I'd do something on one of my favorite video games. I know it isn't the best game ever, but for Warhammer 40k titles, it is something that must be in your collection. And if anyone who has the power to bring a sequel or make an actual working successor, I'm talking like a company, not a random guy, I beg of you to play this extensively so that you will not repeat the demons of the past.